Hello and welcome back to Moonhare Studio. I'm Darren. As you can see, my studio is fully assembled now. In my last video I had to take the whole thing apart for building work, but it's all back together again. I've spent a week recovering from knife crime. Yes, I stabbed myself in the hand with a kitchen knife, which was not a very pleasant experience. I don't recommend it. But now back to normal, and I'm going to spend the whole of this weekend taking on the Spitfire Labs challenge. Right, so the challenge today is to create a piece of music to go with this video that Spitfire have uploaded, and it's it's quite varied. It seems to have a sort of pulse to it to start off with. It's in 4/4, and they have provided some music already for you to actually work to, but very sort of basic gentle chords, so you've got that structure there. Obviously the graphics on screen start to do some quite nice wacky stuff as things go on, and it looks like there should be some sort of slightly higher tempo stuff going on over the top of that. The catch obviously is, and there always is one, you can only use the Spitfire Labs instruments. And the Spitfire Labs at the moment has been relaunched with just 2 instruments, piano and strings. So that's what you've got to work with. And if we have a quick look at the instrument, I mean, there are other videos online to tell you all about it, but you've got the soft piano, which has 2 sliders and this button with a controller here. The button will do different things for different instruments, but it happens to be reverb for this one. And then obviously you can turn that up and down. You've got your overall volume, your expression, whatever you want to call it, which will balance out the instruments within the VST, so between these. And then this is your dynamics, and if you're not a piano player, you can turn it all the way up. It'll just play at full dynamic all the time. If you're a piano player, turn it down, you can get a bit more expression out of it. This is a lovely instrument, one that I have been using for years in the older range. So very good for atmospheric stuff, maybe not quite so easy to use in the context of a very fast-paced video. So the other instruments we've got, say the strings, come in 3 flavours: short, ensemble and long. The shorts are, as you would expect, well, anyway, you get the idea. I'm sure Kate Bush would have liked it. The longs, we'll skip ensembles for now, controlled with the dynamics. And put a little bit of reverb on that actually. As I say, the button controls release as well, so you can get a tighter release, which just cuts straight off, take the reverb out, or more leisurely. Anyway, you've got that, and the ensemble is literally just a combination of the short and the long, so that you get the attack of the short, and you can have your longs in there as well. Not a lot to work with, so we're going to have to be pretty creative. So here's what I've started with. Right, so I've loaded up an instance of each of the 4 instruments, just to give me a starting point anyway. And listening to the long strings, I noticed that in the high registers got quite a lot of air there in the background, and I just thought that I could do something with. So I've brought in the stock morph filter from Steinberg in Cubase, and when you apply that to that sound, you get some really lovely effects, like the old sort of Mini Moog eerie wind type thing going on. So I've decided to employ that to start off with. So we've got this going on, just giving it a bit of a different texture and something that you might not expect to get out of a string library. So the next thing I want is some kind of rhythm. I mean, I'd love to have a drum kit to use, or a beatbox or something to just get that powering along, but I don't have that. So I was just thinking of the lower shorts are actually quite, you know, you're almost at a bass kick drum down there, if you could just harness it in some way. So what I've done is I've kind of constructed my own kick, really. I've played that in and then sampled it. So I've done a render in place, so I've got an audio file to muck around with. And if we bring up the mixer, so my kick audio, which is here, and sounds something like that. So it's got a thump, but it's just not, there's too much of a note there. So what I'm trying to do is I've EQ'd it a bit, which will give me some more sort of thump rather than so much of the note. Still sounds like a note. And then stuck a transient master in to really just get rid of all of that tail and really just start to get the kick. So now I've virtually got it there, just to a thump rather than the actual note itself. So that gives me something to work with. Let's get rid of these and clear that away. And so again, I've kind of remastered those. Oh, dog's barking outside. And then I've created a kick track, and I'll show you how that works. Right, so now what I've got, I've started to generate a bit of a heartbeat with that kick at the beginning, and that's going to start coming in over this music here. And again, generated from pretty much a cello sample, really. So it gives me the basis of a rhythm. And also I've started working on some shorts here, and I'm doing those in a 3/4 time signature over the 4/4 general rhythm, because I just think that makes things slightly different to start off the video with. So you'll be able to hear that coming in as sort of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So even though click track, strictly speaking, is a 4/4, it won't come out like that in the end. Now the next thing I really want is a snare hit of some sort, or something that can counterpoint with the bass drum. And how am I going to get that? Well, I think I've found the way. So to create a snare sound, it's pretty tricky with the two sample sets I've got. So this is going to look a bit ridiculous, but I want the sound at the end of the sample on the strings, not the actual sound itself. So I'm just going to record me bashing as many keys as I can hit at the same time. So here we go. But by bashing all the keys on that short string sample, you get some extraordinary noise at the end of the sample, so because there's so many of them playing. Have a listen to this. And you can hear all that noise at the end, as sort of clicking and clacking. There's a sort of hiss sound as well. So I've cut that up, again rendered in place, and I've ended up with this sound here, which has a bit of a note to it, but it's still got that sort of snarey fizz sound to it, which I can use. So I've started mucking around with that sound, and I've actually managed to create these snare hits. So we'll solo that out and have a little look at what we've got here, and you'll be able to hear what I've finally. Now sounds a bit rubbish in and of itself, but it's giving me that kick snare sort of rhythm. So we've got, and once it's buried underneath everything else, that's going to drive the rhythm along. I've also got a couple of key points in the video where different things happen. So I'll show you how I've used that now snare sample to create some other stuff. So we've got the video going along now. I've programmed in some more strings, and I've also used the long strings and quite heavily effect treated them just to give a lead sound to move things along. I've got my bass and snare going, but there is a point where this thing goes splash. Now I'm sure they've put that in deliberately because it just looks like one of those sort of points. It's not on the beat, but it's an image thing that happens, and you really want to accent it. So I've used our snare sample here, and again I've put some pretty hefty treatment on it. But if we let's just bring that up a bit, and you'll hear what happens when that splash hits. So that just it's not going to be that loud in the mix. Obviously, I've just pushed out, but it highlights that part of the video, and I think those are the sorts of things that are worth looking out for when you're writing to screen. If we bring up the mixer, we can see what I've done there. Let's get rid of our video. So we've got the splash here. I've got a pretty large reverb going on in Valhalla, which is just an extraordinary reverb suite. If you haven't got Valhalla Vintage Verb, I thoroughly recommend it. Doesn't take up much space in your CPU either, but it's just so versatile. Anyway, that's a huge 10-second decay on that. And then I've also brought in Replica, which is giving me my phasing and that sort of weird noises and ping-ponging backwards and forwards, and so that's giving me most of my effects on that one. Now there's a point in the video where it reaches something of a change, where it suddenly seems to up the tempo. Now I've gone, as I said, with the 3/4 to start off with, and then moving into the standard 4/4 later on. But to highlight that event coming up, I've created a sort of crescendo, and I mean this is one of the oldest tricks in the book really. So this build up and then a boom, a splash as we start on this new sequence where things start to get a bit more manic. So basically what you do is you hit a dramatic chord, and this is on the strings, slap a whole load of reverb on it, and then you literally sample that, render it, whatever you want to do, into an audio file, reverse it, and then you get your crescendo of reverb building up. And then the final bit was to put the boom in, which is literally just my bass drum sounds that I programmed in, and then hit with stacks of reverb and a couple of delays going backwards and forwards. So once it's all running with everything else in, it sounds a bit like this. And then we're back into the rest of the track. So I think that's all of the tricks and little bits and pieces I went through to try and get a track that sounded something more interesting than just a string quartet and a piano. And I hope you've maybe picked up a few tips. I mean, I've been learning a lot as I've been going along. This is not the sort of music that I generally program, to be perfectly honest, but just really interesting little project. And check out Spitfire Labs. They're totally free of charge, so you don't have to mangle them quite as badly as I have to do this piece. And if you want to hear the whole piece, I've uploaded that as well, so take a look at that. Thanks a lot, and see you on the next one. you.